right, welcome to AP World History Chapter 2. Let's go ahead and look at China and look and see what we have, because we're going to start off with the worlds of East Asia, China, and its neighbors. So we have the Sui dynasty, or the Sui. They're going to be known for uniting northern and southern China. Very, very important. They are going to build what is called the Grand Canal, and the Grand Canal is going to be very, very important. See, the Grand Canal is going to transport champa rice from Vietnam. Now, the interesting thing about champa rice is that unlike a regular rice strain that you can only grow once a year, champa rice you could grow 3 times a year and you didn't need as much water. So it was so much better than the regular rice. Now, if I can grow rice 3 times a year, that's going to give me more food. So if I have more food, you guessed it, I have more babies. So the Sui dynasty is going to be known for uniting northern and southern China, right in here. And they're going to build the Grand Canal, which is going to do that. And they're going to be able to transport champa rice from Champa, Vietnam. So Vietnam's down here. They're going to be able to take that. Now, after the Sui or the Sui comes the Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty is known for its artistic and bureaucratic setup. They are going to be known for all of these things. Notice the difference in size also. China is going to expand. And guess what that's through? The Silk Trade Route. So we're going to see some big differences here in China. So let's start with the worlds of East Asia. So let's look at China. China has a big and powerful hold on trade, on economies. China's got silk. Everybody wants silk. Okay. So we have the Sui, the Tang, and then we're going to have the Song dynasty. The Song dynasty is going to usher in this examination system that is going to be a way for people to find out where they belong. They can move up in society if they do well on the examination. So this is called a civil service exam. Very, very common in China during this time and very important. Now, this is going to show us the Song dynasty right here. And the 12th century, nomadic Jurchen people conquered much of northern China, giving rise to 2 states, the native Chinese Song in the south and the Jin in the north. Rulers of both states claimed to be heirs to the earlier Tang dynasty, and thus they believed they were the true emperors of China. At the same time, though, distinct new East Asian civilizations are going to continue to develop in Korea, Vietnam, and in Japan. All of them are going to have their eye on China and honestly, decidedly set themselves up based on how China was. So let's start here. Let's look at Korea. So in Korea, they're going to mainly stay independent while they're going to participate in a tribute system. This is basically just going to keep the peace. The geographic location of the area was a threat to the Korean people. Let's go back and look at why. Here's Korea. Here is China. So if China's powerful, you're Korean, maybe a little nervous. Maybe. So let's go back to Korea. So they're going to be a little bit nervous because they're going to feel this threat. Chinese culture and politics had a large influence on Korea. Confucianism and that whole idea of filial piety is going to take hold. Now, remember that Confucianism was women obey son, uncle, father, but everybody obeys the government, okay? Filial piety is that reverence for your ancestors. So why is this all going to be bad for women? Women don't have a say in anything, and we have to answer to everyone. Korea is going to start to become more independent and actually have their own culture. They try to keep as much of their own culture as possible. They actually create their own alphabet called Hangul. They're not going to really adopt a lot of Chinese culture, unlike some other areas. So here's the tribute system. This is the 18th century Korean painting depicting Korean diplomats Their mission to the Qing China, approaching this city, they were heading there, and there are many diaries of Korean envoys. They're going to categorize these sites. When you look at the tribute system, how do you believe that was used in China? The tribute system is that giving of gifts, so you're not overtaken. And so, them being so close, they use tributes to stay safe. Now, Japan. Japan, believe it or not, was actually separated by an ocean. But they did borrow a lot from China. Japan was never able to recreate the seamless bureaucracy that China had, and since they were unable to accomplish this, the samurai class was born. The educated men thought that this was a disgrace. Japanese independence was important, and Japan is going to actually remain independent in the way of religion, the kami, and in governing. Not even the Mongols are going to be able to take over. One interesting thing is that not even the Mongols are able to go in and take over Japan. They're actually going to be stopped by typhoons, or what we call hurricanes, twice. The Bushido and the samurai, they believed in death over surrender, and we're going to see that actually right up until World War II. Here is an image of the samurai. Well decorated. Remember that the samurai were political. They were intelligent, believed in martial arts. Little information on Murasaki.
If you've ever fallen in love with a novel, you know the moment. You look at the clock, it's 1 a.m, and you still can't put the book down. You've been pulled into a world conjured from someone else's imagination, where the thoughts and feelings of the people on the pages are as real as your own. It's hard to imagine a time before novels as we know them existed, but there was in fact a first novel. And if we want to understand how it came into being, we have to look more than 1,000 years into the past at the writing desk of one woman. Her name was Murasaki Shikibu, or at least that's the only name we can give her now. Born into an aristocratic Japanese family sometime in the 970s, she lived at a time when the names of women were rarely recorded. Instead, well-born women like Murasaki were given nicknames, usually related to the rank or position of a close male relative. She lived in an intensely cloistered world where women were constantly shielded from public view by screens or curtains. Sometimes it was easier to identify an aristocratic woman by the distinctive pattern of a protruding sleeve than by her face. Despite the often suffocating limitations on their lives, women like Murasaki were educated and expected to be highly literate. The granddaughter of a famous poet and the daughter of a scholar, Murasaki became conversant in Japanese and Chinese literature so quickly she was considered something of a literary prodigy. In her diary, Murasaki recorded her father's reactions when he realized exactly how talented she was. He said, "Just my luck. What a pity she was not born a man." In her early 20s, she married a man old enough to be her father, who died only 2 years later, but not before they had a daughter. Instead of marrying again, the gifted young widow and mother began work on The Tale of Genji, an intricate saga of romance and intrigue in the life of an imperial prince. The Tale of Genji is often considered the first modern novel because Murasaki offered readers not just a chronicle of events, but deep psychological insight into the characters and their inner lives. Her story made history because it was more than just a story. It was a complex literary portrait of what it means to be human. Although the hero of The Tale of Genji is a man named Prince Genji, Shikibu filled her novel with multifaceted female characters who provided a rare glimpse into how it felt to be a woman in her world. As Virginia Woolf later wrote, when Murasaki set out to illuminate the complicated life of the prince, she naturally chose the medium of other women's minds. The Tale of Genji earned Murasaki a permanent place in literary history. It may also have helped her secure a position at the imperial court, where she became an attendant and occasional tutor to the Empress Shoshi. Murasaki became quite close with the Empress and even secretly taught her Chinese, a language only men were supposed to learn. Although it was a comfortable life, Murasaki was often lonely, and her literary fame made her the target of court gossips who called her pretentious, arrogant, and unfriendly, complaints often heard about successful women even today. No one is sure exactly when Murasaki died, but the legacy she left behind changed Japanese literature forever and left a mark on the broader world of fiction that can never be erased. Throughout history, great novels have traditionally been considered the domain of male writers, while tales of romance, especially those written by women, are often dismissed as frivolous or inferior. But history itself tells a very different story. Not only was the first novel a romance, but it was one of the greatest literary masterpieces in human history, and it was written by a woman. Because she dared to imagine the world in ways that no one had before, we can still hear her voice echoing through time more than 1,000 years later, daring us to imagine worlds of our own.
So, The Tale of Genji is actually the very first true novel. You'll also notice that the very first books that were printed in mass were also printed from woodblock printing that you saw in China.
Japan is an island by the sea filled with volcanoes, and it's in the year negative a billion. Japan might not have been here. In the year negative 40,000, it was here, and you could walk to it, and some people walked to it. Then it got warmer, some icebergs melted, it became an island, and now there's lots of trees because it's warmer. So now there's people on the island. They're basically sort of hanging out in between the mountains, eating nuts off trees, and using the latest technology, like stones and bowls. Ding dong, it's the outside world, and they have technology from the future, like really good metal and crazy rice farms. Now you can make a lot of rice really, really quickly. That means if you own the farm, you own a lot of food, which is something everybody needs to survive. So that makes you king. Rice farming and rice kingdoms spread across the land, all the way to here. The most important kingdoms were here, 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 and here. But this one was the most important, ruled by a heavenly superperson, or emperor for short. Knock knock, get the door, it's religion. The new prince wants everyone to try this hot new religion from Biekt. Please try this religion, he said. No, said everybody. Try it, he said. No, said everybody again, quieter this time. And so the religion was put into place, and all the rules that came with it. Then the government was taken over by another clique, and they made some reforms, like making the government govern more, and making the government more like China's government, which is a government that governs more. Hi, China, they said. Hi, said China. Can you call us something else other than said Japan. Like what, said China. How about Sunrise Land, said Japan. And they stole China's alphabet and wrote a book about themselves. And then they made lots of poetry and art and another book about themselves. Then they stopped moving the capital every time the emperor died and kept it in one place for a while, right here. And they conquered the north finally. Get that squared away. A rich hipster named Kukai is bored with modern Buddhism, visits China, and learns a better version, which is more spiritual. Comes back, reinvents the alphabet, and causes art and literature to be great for a long time. And the royal palace turned into such a dream world of art that they really didn't give a about running the country. So if you live outside the palace, how are you supposed to protect your from criminals? Hire a samurai. Everyone started hiring samurai. Rich, important people hired samurai. Poor people who could not afford to hire samurai did not hire samurai. The samurai became organized and powerful, more powerful than the government. So they made their own military government here. They let the emperor still be emperor, but the shogun is actually in control.
Before the Mongols came in and took over, we had the Song Dynasty. This is going to be an age of golden age of art and literature. It is actually a huge economic revolution in China. It's going to make China the richest, most skilled, and most populous country on earth. So if it's the most populous, that means they're going to have a lot of food. So they go through their own little agricultural revolution. And you're going to end up seeing China being the most urbanized, and Hangzhou is going to be the most populated city in the world. We talked about the Sui dynasty is the one who built the Grand Canal, and they're the ones who united North and South China. And because of that, they were able to get that champa rice from Vietnam, which allowed them in turn to feed their people. But under the Song dynasty, women, however, did not have a very good time. So Confucian writers are going to emphasize that subordination of women. And during this time period, you are going to see women start binding their feet. They see it as like this sign of beauty to make their foot look like a lotus flower. So it's super tiny. The whole thing is during the Song Dynasty, women had this and they couldn't obviously work outside jobs. So during Song Dynasty, women's property rights did expand and they could control their own dowries and even inherit property from their families. But I mean, I guess it's a good thing you could own it since you couldn't leave it. But I guess when you comes to thinking about The Song Dynasty and foot binding, the way I look at it is if you can't walk, you might as well sing. So, how does China's practice of foot binding demonstrate the tightening patriarchy in the Song Dynasty? That's going to be where men are in control and keep control by keeping women at home.
So 这样，就这样。
91-year-old Pi Shi wanted to show us the process which has left her with no feeling in her feet. From the age of 7, she would have to do this every day or face a beating from her parents.
你脖子骨断了能不疼？骨断了，就这样，老了长火药，两上火的时候能不疼？断了，疼。
It was very sore.
疼的都不能走，疼的，下大锁都吃我都疼的。
The tendon in the arch of her foot and the bones in her toes are broken. Like all girls at that time, she was told she'd never marry if she didn't have small feet. Foot binding dates back to the 10th century in China, when tiny feet were deemed a sign of refinement and beauty. The shape of a bound foot was said to resemble a lotus flower, and the most desirable of brides would possess a 3-inch foot known as a golden lotus. Liu Su says she cried all day when she got it done, and the memory is still upsetting. She has kept 2 pairs of shoes. These were actually too big for her.
我过去天天哭，你疼到过来脚，这不能哭了。你不要小脚人，不要紧咋的？过去了。
The 94-year-old's feet are badly deformed. Her daughter talked us through the binding process of breaking each toe, apart from the big toe, and wrapping them tightly under the sole of the foot to create a single point. It has caused her mother a lifetime of pain.
看着母亲叫我难受，我一看她走都不好走，都是有时扶着墙走，她不管个劲儿，就一个脚后跟走，只能脚后跟个劲儿这走。
By the beginning of the 19th century, almost all women in China had their feet bound. And although it was initially most prevalent in the upper classes, it is in the countryside where it became most widespread. In rural villages like this, foot binding continued right.
I love technology when it works.
Like this, foot binding continued right up into the 1950s. It wasn't until deemed was a backward practice. Pi Shi was pleased to see the practice eradicated.
So foot binding does get eradicated. They are starting to bring that back, but a lot of times, if you were somebody who had your foot bound, that showed that you were maybe more wealthy because women who worked every day couldn't do that. So that is going to be China, and then China and its neighbors. What would you say the map suggests about China's relationship with the nomadic people to the north? So let's look at the map. Mongolia. Those are some of those areas. It suggests that China's relationship with the nomadic peoples included much conflict. Think about where the position of the Great Wall is. So they actually built the wall to keep the people from the north out. It does not happen. The Yuan dynasty comes in and the Mongols will take over. That is China.